Mike Dueker, he's chief economist at Russell Investments in Seattle, and he's a former research economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Mike, good to see you. Welcome to the show today. What do you make of what Bernanke had to say? Do you think he's going to pull out the stops? He said all options are still on the table.
Yes, and he sort of had to leave options on the table and not commit himself in any way. In a sense, he's kind of hamstrung to some degree by the fact that the Fed now presents forecasts 4 times a year. At the June meeting, his colleagues will all be presenting the forecast, and so there'll be another round of projections from the Fed. And it's hard for him to act in advance of that. If you go back to 2010, when the Fed only gave forecasts twice a year, and Chairman Bernanke gave that speech at Jackson Hole in late August, he was actually more free at that time to go ahead and forge ahead with the policy without waiting for a new round of projections from the committee. Right now, the thing to watch for in the projections you get in the June meetings for the FOMC will be, are they going to still predict that nominal GDP growth in the U.S. economy will remain above 4.5%, slightly above 4.5%? If that gets downgraded a bit, that would certainly open the door quite a bit for another round of quantitative easing.
And Mike, QE, is that something you're calling for, a third round perhaps of this QE?
Yes, I would. My best guess is that there would be a third round of quantitative easing. And again, my best guess is it will be announced at the August 1st FOMC meeting. By August 1st, you have a new set of projections from the other Fed policymakers. And you also have the first report on GDP from the second quarter in the U.S. So they'll have a better idea about whether people believe nominal GDP will stay above 4.5%, and we'll actually have a fresh number for the second quarter by the August 1st meeting.
Well, the Fed obviously under pressure given what's happening in the U.S., but the global cues are not good. We saw China cutting its interest rate overnight, Spain downgraded, the euro crisis dragging on. Talk about the impact to the U.S. economy and whether you see things getting worse before they get better.
Actually, my view on the Chinese rate cut might be a little bit contrarian. My view is actually that it's good news because it shows that the Chinese policymakers are still aiming to get growth of between 7 and 8%. That means that they're worried about Europe, they're worried about a global slowdown coming from a major financial event out of Europe, but they're not too worried about it to capitulate and say we're going to give up. We don't think that we're going to be able to have high growth in this global economy, and we're going to retrench, and we're going to cut back growth expectations. So I think the Chinese rate cut is actually good news, and I think Germany should be a keen observer of that by saying that we still have some confidence in emerging markets that things are going to be okay and that growth is going to remain high globally, and that means German exports to emerging markets will remain high. That's also a sign for Germany to think about trying to help do something to make that a reality in Europe.
And as far as the U.S. is concerned, does this help the U.S. in any way? The prospect of growth remaining relatively strong in China. The latest numbers we've gotten out of the U.S. are not necessarily encouraging.
No, the last 2 payroll employment numbers have been just terrible. And again, this is not a short-run phenomenon. Nominal GDP growth in the U.S. economy has not been at a 4.5% level since the second quarter of 2010, which coincidentally was the date of the first Greek bailout. So the U.S. economy has had a 2-year period where growth has been subpar in terms of nominal GDP growth, and it's time for the Fed to take some ownership of that and perhaps think about another round of quantitative easing. But of course, it'll be key to look at the June meeting to see what they think going forward, not looking backward, but going forward, what do they think nominal GDP growth is going to be.
Mike, we've got to leave it there. Thanks for taking time to join us today. That's Mike Dueker, chief economist at Russell Investments.